There is a specific kind of quiet that arrives not when you have finally solved your life, but when your mind has quietly given up trying. We call it peace. We welcome it as healing. But beneath that sudden, unearned tranquility lies a far more unsettling psychological reality. It is the silent alarm of a subconscious that has deemed the truth too dangerous for you to feel, choosing anesthesia over awareness. Consider those moments when a long-standing storm inside your mind abruptly clears. For months, there was an ambient friction, an exhausting internal debate about a relationship, a career path, or a lingering memory. Then overnight, the noise stops. A profound stillness settles in. You feel unburdened and entirely functional. It feels like an emotional breakthrough, a sudden alignment arriving without visible effort or external change. You wake up finding that your immediate surroundings have undergone a strange transformation. It is as if the acoustics of your room have subtly shifted. The ambient sounds of the street no longer bounce off the walls, but vanish into a soft, distant void. We celebrate these moments as personal triumphs, assuming our psyche did the hard work of resolution while we slept. Yet true psychological resolution rarely behaves like a light switch. Looking closer at this sudden serenity, a strange pattern emerges. We move through life with a peculiar detachment. Things that used to provoke a deep, visceral reaction, a critical remark from a colleague, unresolved tension with a partner, or creeping anxiety about the future, now bounce off a perfectly smooth surface. It feels like Zen, but lacks the warmth of genuine presence. You aren't processing the world differently. You are experiencing it from a distance, as if watching your own life unfold through a thick pane of glass. Your routines become flawlessly orderly, your responses carefully measured, and your internal landscape completely unshakable. It is an impeccably designed equilibrium, an emotional baseline so flat that it mimics profound spiritual enlightenment. This is where the comforting illusion of tranquility begins to fracture. In deep psychological exploration, within the framework of Jungian analysis, we learn that the psyche never simply discards energy. An unresolved emotional conflict cannot evaporate, it can only be redistributed. When an internal crisis vanishes without actual resolution, it signifies that the ego has not conquered the threat, but has suffered a quiet total capitulation. The mind, recognizing that the ongoing friction consumes too many vital resources, deploys its most extreme defense mechanism, a profound systemic numbing that masquerades as peace. The terror of this state lies precisely in its perfection. You do not feel miserable or anxious. You feel nothing destructive at all, because the conscious mind is completely severed from the war raging in the unseen layers of consciousness. This leaves us standing before a deeply unsettling realization. The tranquility we actively cultivate might not be the presence of health, but rather the highly organized absence of conflict. We are forced to look beyond the serene surface of our emotional state and ask a disturbing question. What if the quiet you are experiencing right now isn't a sign that you have finally healed, but proof that a vital part of your mind has gone completely silent to protect you from a truth you are still too terrified to face? To understand how this protective silence operates, we have to look closely at what happens to our memory when this unearned peace takes over. Imagine a social gathering where a close friend unexpectedly recounts a chaotic, deeply painful episode from your own past, a moment that once broke your heart or completely derailed your ambitions. As they speak, you notice something strange. You find yourself laughing along with the group, entirely unfazed, as if listening to an amusing anecdote about a total stranger. The details are still perfectly sharp, but the emotional sting is completely gone. We tell ourselves this is healing, that time has worked its magic. But if you observe the mechanics of this state, you notice a troubling dynamic. You haven't actually integrated the experience, you have simply stopped relating to it. The memory has been converted into a bloodless historical fact that belongs to someone else. This is the great paradox of the tranquil mind. It achieves stability not by resolving the crisis, but by making the self an absolute stranger to its own history. This shift reveals a deeper, more unsettling layer of our psychological architecture. The human mind is not designed to maximize truth, it is designed to ensure psychological survival. When an internal conflict becomes so intense that it threatens to rupture our functional identity, the psyche doesn't keep fighting an unwinnable war. Instead, it initiates a quiet internal partition. It walls off the wounded territory, isolates the emotional energy associated with it, and leaves the conscious ego to inhabit a smaller, sanitized room. This sanitized room is what we perceive as peace. It feels spacious and light only because we are no longer aware of the heavy luggage locked away in the basement. The tragedy of this condition is that we actively participate in maintaining the illusion, guarding our sudden calm with a fierce, almost desperate vigilance, terrified of any disruption that might force us to look beneath the floorboards. By mistaking this systemic shutdown for genuine resolution, we inadvertently close the door on our own development. We become prisoners of our own defense mechanisms, living in a beautifully constructed fort where nothing hurts, but nothing truly changes either. This leaves us facing a far more demanding dilemma. If our deepest peace is actually a form of sophisticated evasion, how can we ever distinguish between real emotional maturity and a highly organized psychological retreat? To find out, we have to look past the surface symptoms of calm and examine the hidden architectural blueprint that the subconscious uses to build this inner sanctuary. To look behind this sanctuary is to confront a concept known in depth psychology as the autonomous capsule of the unconscious. When a conflict becomes too structurally complex for the daily mind to process, such as the shattering realization that a life path you pursued for a decade was built on a false promise, the mind splits. It does not dissolve the painful realization. Instead, it wraps it in a thick layer of psychological scar tissue, burying it deep within the sublayers of awareness. The conscious self is then granted a sudden, clean slate. But this erasure comes at a steep price. Because the psychic energy tied to that hidden conflict is still highly active, it must find a backdoor out of the basement. It cannot emerge as an explicit thought or an overt emotion, so it translates itself into subtle structural changes in how you interact with the physical world. You can observe this leakage in the micro-habits of your daily routine. A person inhabiting this artificial tranquility will often develop a quiet, intense preoccupation with controlling small variables. They might become hyper-fixated on the exact organization of their workspace, find themselves unable to tolerate a minor delay in their schedule, or notice a creeping rigidity in how they judge the behavior of others. The chaotic storm that was once internal has been projected outward onto the immediate environment. They believe they are simply living a more disciplined, mindful life, completely unaware that this external precision is a frantic containment strategy. It is the desperate effort of an unstable system trying to prevent the buried capsule from leaking back into consciousness. This reveals a profound shift in how we must interpret our mental well-being. True peace is adaptive, flexible, and deeply connected to the fluid movement of life. It allows for grief, surprise, and spontaneous joy. This counterfeit quiet, however, is brittle. It depends entirely on nothing moving, nothing changing, and no one asking the wrong question. It is an equilibrium built on top of a dormant volcano, functioning perfectly until an unexpected tremor cracks the surface. And it is precisely within these subtle cracks that we begin to see the true scale of what the mind is hiding, leading us toward an even deeper territory of human consciousness, where our actual identity is being held hostage by the very defenses meant to protect it. To understand this containment, we must explore how the mind constructs an elaborate internal decoy to distract us from the truth. To understand the full scope of this internal arrangement, we must step back and examine how the mind constructs our very sense of identity. We typically think of the self as a singular, cohesive entity, a continuous thread of awareness that grows wiser and more stable over time. But depth psychology reveals a radically different architecture. The mind functions less like a solid monument and more like a fluid ecosystem, constantly balancing competing forces. When a part of your experience clashes violently with who you believe you are, your conscious identity does not expand to accommodate the tension. Instead, it shrinks. It leaves the unwanted parts of the self behind in the dark, creating a beautiful, highly selective portrait of the ego that feels entirely complete, yet is fundamentally hollowed out. This reframes the entire nature of our sudden inner calm. The tranquility you experience is not a sign that you have harmonized your internal conflicts. It is the realization that a border has been drawn. You have successfully alienated a piece of your own soul. The conflict has ended not because peace was achieved, but because one of the combatants was entirely banished from the field. What we call a state of Zen is often just the profound silence of a psychic amputation. The mind has traded wholeness for safety, choosing to live as a fragment rather than endure the agonizing friction of being complete. The consequences of this trade-off ripple silently through our entire experience of reality. When you amputate a part of your internal world to preserve your peace, you lose more than just the pain. You lose the specific vitality, the raw creative energy, and the intuitive depth that was bound up within that rejected experience. The landscape around you begins to lose its vividness. Conversations feel slightly more formulaic, achievements feel curiously empty, and your emotional life begins to resemble a carefully scripted play where you know every line before it is spoken. You are perfectly safe, but you are also perfectly confined. This leaves us observing a strange, haunting mutation in how we perceive our own maturity. We think we are moving forward, but we are actually frozen in a perfectly preserved posture. The terrifying truth is that this artificial equilibrium can last for years, sustained by the quiet lie that everything is fine. Yet the excluded parts of ourselves never truly accept their exile. They remain in the shadows, waiting for the single moment of vulnerability where the fortress wall thins, forcing us to realize that the life we are protecting is no longer entirely our own. This profound internal division does not remain an abstract theory. It manifests in the subtle, often chilling precision of our daily behaviors. You can spot it in the way you navigate interpersonal intimacy. When someone close to you offers a moment of raw, unvarnished vulnerability, or perhaps expresses a deep, burning resentment, you do not feel the natural somatic response of empathy or defensiveness. Your pulse does not quicken. Instead, you find yourself analyzing their emotional state with the detached curiosity of a clinical observer. You say exactly the right words, offer the perfect reassuring gesture, and provide flawless support. Yet your core remains entirely untouched. You are executing the choreography of connection without ever leaving your psychological watchtower. You might also recognize this dynamic in how you encounter beauty or tragedy. When listening to a piece of music that once moved you to tears, or when witnessing a profound human struggle, you find yourself evaluating the experience rather than inhabiting it. You intellectualize the moment, assigning it a specific value or meaning within your mental framework, using your intellect as a shield against raw sensation. The mind has become so terrified of being disrupted by intense emotion that it automatically converts every visceral experience into a safe, digestible concept. You live in a state of perpetual curation, where even your moments of apparent relaxation are carefully monitored to ensure they do not cross the boundary into unpredictable emotional territory. This is where the theoretical model and lived reality finally collapse into one another. This counterfeit peace isn't just a defensive strategy, it is an active, ongoing rewriting of your daily perception. You begin to crave predictability above all else, subtly engineering your life to avoid any environment, conversation, or relationship that might challenge the fragile equilibrium you have constructed. You become the meticulous custodian of your own museum, polished and perfectly arranged, but devoid of any real, unpredictable life. The true weight of this realization hits when you look closely at your own reflection during a moment of sudden emptiness. In the absence of external noise, you don't feel the expansive freedom of a liberated mind. You feel a faint, persistent background hum, a subtle, vibrating urgency that demands you immediately find a task, plan a schedule, or catalog a memory. It is the sound of the ego's engine running on high alert, working tirelessly to maintain the silence. The realization becomes immediate and impossible to ignore. Your prized serenity is not an open field of freedom, but a beautifully upholstered cell, and the warden keeping you inside is your own conscious mind. Think of those specific moments of hard-won achievement, like the conclusion of a massive professional project, when your entire team stands up to offer a resounding ovation. By all conventional measures, you should feel a profound surge of validation and triumph. Yet, as you look at the smiling faces around you, you are struck by a faint, ghost-like impression that you are merely spectating your own success. You watch their moving hands and find yourself mechanically counting the rhythm of the applause, completely unmoored from the victory. You look at the life you have meticulously built, the stable routines, the calm relationships, the predictable successes, and instead of pride, you feel a quiet, heavy bewilderment. It is the realization that in your pursuit of a life without pain, you have accidentally engineered a life without presence. This is where the intellectual concept transforms into an intimate, undeniable emotional weight. You begin to see that this sudden peace did not come free. It was paid for with the currency of your own raw vitality. You realize why your relationships, though peaceful, lack the electricity of genuine vulnerability. You understand why your achievements, though frequent, feel like items being checked off an invisible list rather than expressions of deep passion. You are living in the aftermath of a quiet bargain your subconscious made without your conscious consent. It chose to lower the emotional temperature of your entire world just to keep you from burning. To sit with this awareness is to experience a unique kind of grief, a mourning not for what you have lost, but for the parts of yourself you have actively shut away. It is the realization that the version of you currently moving through the world is a compromised, heavily edited draft. And as you face this uncomfortable truth, you are left with an inescapable question that marks the boundary of your current reality. Are you truly willing to spend the rest of your life defending a counterfeit peace? Or do you possess the courage to dismantle the fortress, step back into the storm, and finally reclaim the terrifying wholeness of who you actually are? Ultimately, we must confront the profound illusion of the tranquil mind, the belief that the absence of pain is the same thing as the presence of life. True psychological integration is never static, nor is it particularly comfortable. It is a dynamic, often tumultuous process of constantly meeting the hidden, unruly dimensions of our own consciousness. When we demand absolute peace from an unpredictable existence, we inadvertently force our subconscious to become our jailer, trading our capacity for deep feeling for the safety of a numb equilibrium. The terrifying truth hiding behind your sudden tranquility is that the mind would rather live in a beautifully constructed fiction than face the messy reality of its own completeness. Genuine healing does not silence the inner storm. It simply expands your capacity to inhabit it. The quiet you feel right now is not the final destination. It is merely a threshold, a silent pause before the psyche demands that you look beneath the floorboards and choose between a peaceful sleep or a deeply disruptive, authentic awakening.